Joining us now are exclusive political analyst Jeff Atwater, former state CFO and state Senate president, former U.S. Congressman Ron Klein, our exclusive political analyst, as I said, talk about the immediate results of this race. This might be the hardest question first. Ron, I'll start with you. Biggest surprise of the night?
Probably the U.S. Senate race on the Democrat side. The candidate who was a lower key candidate, didn't have the kind of resources.
Angie Nixon.
Angie Nixon ran apparently a good campaign of getting the vote out. So I think she probably was. We have some local races that are also interesting.
What about you, Jeff? Anything that struck you in particular that you said, nah, I didn't know if that was coming?
I think the same, really, because I think that U.S. Senate race is going to be top of the ticket in the fall, and I think both were expecting that you might see names that were more familiar nationally in that race. So I think that was a surprise.
All right, let's jump ahead to the race for governor. The primaries set up Congressman Byron Donalds, the Republican endorsed by President Trump, against former Republican Congressman David Jolly, the Democrat in this race. Both won handily. Anything about those races, and I'll start with you, Jeff, that might be a telltale sign about what happens in November?
I think it played out on the Republican side. I think as everyone was anticipating when the Trump endorsement came, the resources flowed, and so did the enthusiasm to the congressman. But I do think that anybody that would be taking anything for granted in the fall would be making a mistake. It is a midterm, and I think that it sets up to be, I think, a very competitive race, because I think both of these candidates are going to present themselves well, and they'll be articulate in their presentation, and they're going to have the resources to fight it out.
Lieutenant Governor Jay Collins, who was tapped by Governor DeSantis for his role, did capture about 1 of every 4 votes. Not sure that makes a difference. There's no endorsement from Governor DeSantis for Congressman Donalds so far. Does that bode at all anything for November, these factors?
If I had to guess, I would say this is going to be a competitive race, only because the mood is such. Republicans have won statewide for a number of years now, but I think this could be a year where there's a big pushback on the establishment. Establishment is Republican leadership role, running the table for the last 30 years. And I think people are looking for something different. And because of affordability in Florida and health care and property insurance and things like that, there are definitely some issues that can be attacked on the existing people in charge.
Either of you think there's a particular Democratic incumbent, and Democrats were forced to run in some districts where they had not run before, who is particularly vulnerable after tonight? Anybody in particular, Jeff?
I don't think so. There was a couple of these seats that we would have. There was one in Central Florida where you have a Congressman Soto, and you have one here in South Florida. But again, I think even though they were redrawn that gave a tilt on voter registration more towards a Republican outcome, I think, again, midterm, where the mood is at this moment, I think they're going to be very competitive. I don't think you're going to see yet, I don't think we could see from tonight, that any of those likely play out to where people thought they were going to go. I think they're going to be competitive to the finish line.
Ron, what do you think?
I also think the races are going to be competitive. There were 4 seats that were sort of Democrat seats that were redrawn and taken away, if you will. The people who were in those seats are either running in the reconstructed seats or something like that. But I think they'll all be competitive, even though they do have a Republican advantage now. I think it's going to be a competitive year.
All right. Well, I'll leave it there for now. We have some more to talk about because here comes November 3rd. Jeff Atwater, Ron Klein, thank you so much, our exclusive political analysts.